The walk with God is not always dramatic. In fact, most of the time it is not. Most of the time it's just going to be just that every day, day after day, day after day. He's going to show up in those big moments. But that's not where you're going to find God every day. I think Elijah had been through such a dramatic, mighty move of God that he was having a hard time finding God in the everyday. Do you want to achieve your goals, but anxiety is tripping you up? Like to keep those fun weekend plans, but depression has you counseling again? Hey, I'm Lori, dog mom, lover of nature, and hygge enthusiast. Positive psychology skills help me overcome chronic severe PTSD. If you're ready to learn how to overcome your anxiety and depression and rediscover happiness and purpose in life, then get your cozy on and let's get started. So last week, we talked about all the things in Elijah's life that had brought him to this point, his dramatic ministry, all the miracles that God had wrought, living under the threat of his life for 3.5 years, having this huge day on Mount Carmel, and then running before King Ahab's chariot to get it back to Jezreel. And then thinking that the battle's over, they'd won this huge victory. He lets his guard down, and then all of a sudden, bam, he's hit with this, "You're going to be dead in 24 hours" from Queen Jezebel. And we find him then under the juniper tree where he's just crying out to God, "Take my life. I've had enough. I haven't accomplished anything." And the first thing that God does, and this is so beautiful, is he meets his physical needs, where he has him sleep, he feeds him, he gives him water to drink, before he begins to draw him away to himself and to Mount Horeb to be able to minister to his spiritual needs. And that's what we're going to pick up today. The next thing he does is he draws him to himself onto Mount Horeb, also known as Mount Sinai. So it's the same mountain where Moses met with God and saw his glory. It was hidden in the cleft of the rock. In fact, there's some people that feel like the cave that Elijah went to might have been the very same cleft that Moses was in. But it's where he received the 10 Commandments. It's where God gave him direction for how to build the temple. This was God's mountain where Elijah went. So the next thing Elijah does after his physical needs are met, he goes to where God is so he can get his spiritual needs met. Elijah wanted answers, needed answers, and God pulled him away apart unto himself to give him some of those, to give him those answers and to refresh him spiritually. The next thing I find that's interesting is God allows Elijah to vent. He asked him twice, "What are you doing here?" And Elijah pretty much verbatim says, "I'm the only one left serving you. And I've just, everything is just blah." And he vents twice. Same thing. God lets him vent his frustrations. And this is something I didn't see in exactly that context or that light until I was studying for this, getting prepared for this podcast. And it just clicked. I remember the very first time this happened to me. I was in my late 20s and someone I love dearly was going through a really, really hard time because of how people were treating them. And as hard as it is to go through a tough time yourself, it's 10 times harder to watch someone you love go through it. And for those of you that have been there, you know exactly what I'm saying. It is so hard to see someone you love going through a difficult, broken time. You want so badly to step in and make it different. And I remember standing in my bedroom, looking out the window and trying so hard to get my prayer and my thoughts and how I felt in line with what they, quote, should be. And it was a losing battle because I was so frustrated and so angry with what was happening to the people that I loved. And I can just almost as clear as you can hear my voice, I heard God whisper to my heart, "Lori, tell me exactly how you feel because I already know." Oh my goodness. And so I did. I used to start pouring out all my frustration and my anger at these people. And why was God allowing this? And I don't understand. And this was wrong. It was so wrong. How could God allow this? And I got all the way done. And just as clear, again, just that clear voice in my heart says, "Lori, I agree. It is wrong." I'm like, what? God met me exactly where I was and let me express how I felt. God does not need us to clean ourselves up before we come talk to him. He knows exactly where we are. and he will meet us exactly right there. We can tell him what we're feeling, how we're feeling, why we're feeling that way, what is going on in our heart and mind. He knows already. And if we bring it to him and talk to him about it, he can help us deal with that. So God allows Elijah to vent twice because he knew what he had gone through in the last 3.5 years had been stressful, exhausting, and he thought he had accomplished nothing through all of that. That is extremely frustrating and it's hard and difficult. God does not run from that. He welcomes it. Come and talk to me and tell me about it is what he's giving Elijah an opportunity to do. The third thing that God does is he reveals himself to Elijah. Now, Elijah had been through some very dramatic things, dramatic moves of God. Something I have found in my own personal walk with God is when you have like really high victories or really dramatic services, which are beautiful, and trust me, I never want to lose that. I love every minute of it. You often will have a countering low spot. So for every high, there is a low. And so after you come out of this really high moment on Mount Carmel, Elijah experiences the low of the juniper tree. And God is helping him in this moment where God begins to reveal himself to let him know that God isn't just in the big moments. Yes, God had been there when he appeared before Ahab. He had been there by the brook and the ravens, been there with the widow on Mount Carmel, just dramatic, climactic day. God had been in all of that. But as God shows up in this where there's, the strong wind and the fire, etc., and then you hear the still small voice. This is where you're going to find God on the everyday basis. Yes, he's there in the dramatic moments. He will be there for you in the low moments. But where you're going to find God is in the still small voice. The walk with God is not always dramatic. In fact, most of the time it is not. Most of the time it's just going to be just that every day, day after day, day after day. He's going to show up in those big moments. But that's not where you're going to find God every day. And I think Elijah had been through such a dramatic, mighty move of God that he was having a hard time finding God in the everyday. That happened with me when I was in Kuwait, and I mentioned this in my very first podcast. So many times God showed up in dramatic and mighty ways when I was in Kuwait. Incredible. I mean, just miracles God would perform and just amazing moves of God. And then I came back to the States and I went from briefing 3 and 4-star generals, SESs that are senior executive service members that are equivalent to generals that were clear up at the top of their careers, and having like this high visibility project that was go, 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 and critical, important, etc. I came home to nothing. I mean, I got put in a corner and told to catch up on my training. Now, understand the training needed to be caught up on. I was behind. But it was nothing. Like all of a sudden, I was stuck doing busy work. At least it felt like busy work to me. And I wasn't briefing anybody anymore. I was doing good to brief my team leader. There was such a dramatic shift of that. And then obviously my physical, emotional, mental, all that started falling apart. But learning how to find God in the everyday instead of the dramatic. This is, I think, what God was showing Elijah in this moment. Yes, God does show up in the dramatic, but where you're going to find him every single day is that still, small voice that you can tune into where God will meet you in your day-to-day life. The fourth thing that God did for Elijah was he gave him a new purpose. For 3.5 years, Elijah knew exactly what got him out of bed every single morning. It was the drought and calling people back to the worship of the one true God, Jehovah. Letting them know that Baal was a false god, demonstrating that in true and living color. Bringing God's judgment for them having turned their back upon him. He knew exactly what got him out of bed every single day. But at the culmination of Mount Carmel, all of a sudden that mission's done. What do you do now? And when I came back from when I was in Kuwait, I knew exactly what got me out of bed every morning. Very clear mission, very clear purpose, a very clear drive. I believed in that project with all of my heart, was very passionate about it every single day for over 3 years. This was my very clear calling. God had clearly laid this on my heart, and I was moving forward doing it. I came home, I had no idea what my purpose was anymore. I didn't really feel like I had one. I didn't have a reason that like just drove me that when I got out of bed, this is what you're doing. This is why you're doing it. Go, go, go. I had lost that. And there's nothing like losing your purpose that can lead to such a feeling of hopelessness and uselessness. And why am I even here? In fact, I was listening to Dr. Josh Axe, and many of you are going to know that name, but he was talking to a small group of us about how to combat stress, which is one of the number one killers in the United States. And one of the keys of that is having a clear purpose. Because if you know why you are here and what God has for you, it helps you to get out of bed in the morning and to put one foot in front of the other, even through the hard times, because you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. You know why you're pushing through the hard times. You know why God has you here, because you have a very clear mission and purpose. Elijah had lost that because his mission was done. He no longer had another purpose. He no longer had a reason to keep going. God gives that to him in this moment. God says, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go back and anoint another leader. I want you to anoint a king over here. I want you to do this, et cetera, et cetera. He lays out his whole new mission and purpose. Having that is a fantastic way to help you, to motivate you, to keep you going forward. And if you are in a place where you feel like you don't have a purpose, get on your face before God and ask him to give you one. Ask him to reveal that to you. And sometimes that purpose may just be standing still and learning. There are times God puts us on a shelf for a reason, because he's molding us and making us and turning us into what he wants us to be. And it's super hard to be patient during those times. Trust me, I know. But having a purpose and knowing where God is taking you through some of the darkest times, and I mentioned this in my very first podcast. I was in one of the lowest points in my life when I heard someone, Dr. Dan Pompa, mention pain to purpose. And I clutched onto that with both hands, because knowing that God was going to bring me through the pain that I was in, he had a purpose for it. And this is part of that purpose. This podcast, talking to you guys today, is part of the purpose that God had for me. The reason he had me going through that pain, because he had a purpose on the other side. Knowing there was purpose is one of the only things that kept me going many days. It kept me getting out of bed and keep trying and trying and trying again, because I knew there was a reason God was doing this. I knew he had a mission and a purpose for me on the other side. If you do not have a purpose, get on your face before God and ask him to give you one. Ask him to show you what that is. And he does that for Elijah while he was there on Mount Horeb. The fifth thing he gave him, and this is just so beautiful, he gives him a friend and a successor. We need people. And I've been talking about this on my podcast lately. We need people. It's so important. God created us to be social creatures. We need that connection. We need that support. We are not called to be lone rangers. God called us to serve people and to be with people. And God gives him a friend, Elisha. He goes and anoints Elisha. Elisha follows him from that point to the end of his ministry. God gave him a friend. And God gave me friends as well. I'm very close friends that have walked through me. Some of the darkest times in my life have been there. There have been colleagues that have helped me, doctors, a whole team of people that have gotten me to where I am today. But while I was in the trenches, while I was in the battle, God gave me some very dear friends that are super dear and close to my heart that helped walk me through that battle. And then the fallout, God gave me other friends to stand beside me, to pray for me, to support me, to be faithful, that I will never be able to repay that debt. God gave me friends because we need them. We need people to come alongside us and to help us and support us. And God gives him that. God also gives him a successor in Elisha. letting him know that his work was not in vain, that God did have an endpoint there. God had a purpose. God was accomplishing things through his work that he did not see. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that Elijah was not seeing. And Elisha was his successor to be able to carry on that message after Elijah had gone to heaven. So he gives them a friend and a successor, and that gives him a hope that his work would continue. Another thing that God does for him is he assures him that ultimate justice will be served, that there will be ultimate justice. And when I mentioned earlier the time when some dear friends, people that I loved very much, were going through a difficult time, and there's stuff that was done that was wrong, and God had told me, I agree with you. It is wrong. God gave me a passage, I believe it's in Romans, that vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. God is a God of perfect justice. He will see justice done in every situation. God is a God of perfect justice, but he's also a God of mercy and forgiveness. The same kind of forgiveness and love that I need, he gives to those that are, quote, my enemies. Now, I don't actually have any enemies, but the people that would do us ill, that wish us ill or would do us harm, are those that we love. We want to go out, and it's a natural desire to have justice. This is a natural desire to see justice done. But God's telling us in the book of Romans, I will make sure this is done the right way. And I remember so clearly when God gave me this passage. Basically, he told me, Lori, keep your hands off. Because if you get involved, you are going to mess everything up because you do not know what I know. I know their hearts. I know the situation behind it, and I love them and will extend to them the grace and mercy just like I did to you. Just like God loves me and gave me mercy and gave me forgiveness, he offers the same thing to my enemies, or to those that would do me harm, or those that I love harm. God is offering them the same amount of love and mercy and forgiveness as he did to me. And so if I leave it up to God to carry out justice, he has perfect justice because he's a perfect God, balanced with perfect mercy and perfect love, just like he did it for me. He will balance justice and mercy and love in a way that I can never do because I'm not God. So by releasing that and giving it to God, that is what God is telling Elijah. Justice will be done for the people that have forsaken the God of Jehovah and insist on following the God of Balaam. There will be justice. I will ensure it. Those that have done wrong against you, there will be justice. I will ensure it. But God tempers his justice with mercy. And if we leave it up to God to carry it out, it will be done perfectly. If we get our hands dirty with it, it's going to be all screwed up and messed up. And we will be held accountable for what we do. So just a little note here. If there's someone that has done wrong in your life, give it to God to carry out justice. Let him handle that. The last thing that God does here in this passage, the seventh thing, is he assures Elijah that his work was not in vain. In fact, there were 7,000 people who had not bowed the knee to Baal. Can you imagine? Elijah goes into this, starts out the passage saying, God, I'm by myself. It's just me. Just take my life and let it be done. I can't do this anymore. And God wraps up this passage telling him there are 7,000 people that your ministry has impacted. 7,000. Yes, Mount Carmel, it was hugely dramatic. There was this big thing where God came in a mighty, mighty way, and it appears to have been for naught. It doesn't seem to have changed anything. But through the 3.5 years of quiet ministry of Elijah, watching him day to day, day after day after day after day, watching him live out God in his life, watching him God perform miracles through the life of Elijah, watching Elijah be faithful to the one true God in spite of his life being at risk, had impacted the lives of 7,000 people. 7,000 people had not bowed the knee to Baal because of what God had done through the life of Elijah and the ministry that God had executed through that. So many times we think that God is doing his work in the big moments. And again, don't let me take away from what God does in the big moments. That is not where hearts and minds are changed. Hearts and minds are changed in the small moments when that person kneels in humbleness before God and God can perform a work in their life. That is where change takes place, in the quiet moments when God changes the heart. We can see these huge times when God moves mightily, and I'm not taking away from that. I love those times. Those are amazing. But to see true change in the life, it has to start in the heart. God has to change the heart of an individual. That's where you're going to see it. And those often take place in the quiet moments. I remember this was after I'd been in Kuwait. I was back in the States, and I had been working with this. He was a lieutenant colonel at the time, or a major, I think, actually. Anyway, I had worked with him for about 18 months. We had never talked about God really. I talked about God all the time in my day-to-day life, but we never had like this quote conversation where we broke it down and really talked about God. And something happened, and we started talking, and I realized he had been watching my life for 18 months. I never really even thought about it. I hadn't really sat down and thought I'm not having any impact. I never really had that conversation with myself. But I never really thought about the fact that he had been watching me for a year and a half, watching my life. But he had been. And God opened the doors, and I was able to talk to him and share with him the gospel because he had watched my life for 18 months. It wasn't the dramatic moments where God was moving in that situation. It was the little tiny moments. And we're seeing this played out right now in the news with Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk's life was big and dramatic. His execution was as well. His memorial, which we just had, all this is big and dramatic. But the biggest impact that Charlie had was in those quiet moments in private when he's speaking to people and living the life of Christ before them in the daily parts of his life. That's where God changes hearts and minds, is in the quiet moments. This is where true change takes place. It's not in the dramatic moments. It's when God changes the heart. And we see this in the life of Elijah, where he assures him, your work was not in vain. You may not have seen results out of Mount Carmel, but through your daily life, there's 7,000 people who have not bowed the knee to Baal because of your ministry. It's just such a beautiful thing in how God works. So just to kind of wrap up and review, we see how God first meets his physical needs and has him sleep and rest, to eat and drink, and then pulls him apart to himself to be able to minister to his spirit. He allows him to vent. This is important. You need to talk to God and be honest with him exactly where you are. Don't try to shape your emotions into what they, quote, should be. Just be honest. God reveals himself to him in the quiet moments. Yes, he's there in the dramatic moments, but you're going to find him more often in the quiet. He gives him a new mission and a new purpose. He gives him a friend and a successor. He assures him justice will be done. And he lets him know his work was not in vain, that he had 7,000 other people that were following the one true God as well, largely due to the life and ministry of Elijah. So today, friends, if you're in a place where you feel like, I can't take another step forward, life is just not worth living, one, you can bring that to God and let him know. He's not afraid of that. You don't have to try to shape your feelings into some kind of perfect mold into what they should be. Just come to him exactly as you are. God will meet you in that space with compassion, with mercy, with grace. He will meet you where you are and give you what you need. He's done it for me. He did it for Elijah, and he can do the same for you. If you would like to get in contact, feel free to reach out. Our brand new email is support@practicalsolutionsforptsd.com. You can also reach out on Facebook. The link is in the comments below. Hey, my friend, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, would you please take 30 seconds and share it with someone you know who may be struggling with depression and anxiety? Also, would you please leave a quick review for the show? Knowing how this podcast is helping you fills my heart with so much joy, and it motivates me for future episodes. For now, it's time for Sam and I to head outside to enjoy some sunshine and fresh air. We'll see you back here on Tuesdays and Thursdays for more great episodes. And just a quick theological correction where I misspoke last week with Elijah Part 1. Jesus was incarnated into human form, not reincarnated. My tongue got ahead of me. So just a quick correction on that.